Chef Liz Eckert. She's the Director of Culinary at the Great Lakes Culinary Institute at Northwestern Michigan College. When she moved to Michigan, she was exposed to the concept of farm to table, and in 2022, her and the team at GCLI added environmental stewardship to their strategic plan and curriculum, which is what she'll be talking about today. Please welcome Chef Liz Eckert.
How is everybody? So yes, I'm Chef Les Eckert, and I am the Culinary Director that oversees Great Lakes Culinary Institute at Northwestern Michigan College. And I'm a Floridian. I am working my way north as opposed to everyone working their way south. And my travel upwards to Michigan has really brought me to see some great farming practices that are being celebrated by a lot of restaurants in the food service industry. When I started in culinary in Florida, the concept of farm to table really wasn't there. Probably the food service industry is one industry that produces a tremendous amount of waste, and that looks very different wherever you go, and that can be waste in wastewater, food that's going into the landfill. And so over the last 2 decades, there has been quite a bit of change in areas where thinking about your food waste was just not something you did. So when I moved from Florida, before I got here to Michigan, I stopped off in Durham, North Carolina for about 4 years, and I was also at a higher ed culinary school there. And the neat thing about that is if you're in Durham, North Carolina, you're in the midst of downtown, but 20 minutes in almost any direction, and it landed you in farming land. And that is where I really started making a connection with not just farm to table, but the farmers themselves. And that's what was so intriguing about, wow, what are we doing with food? What are we teaching our students? So I got the bug of environmental stewardship in those 4 years of living in Durham, North Carolina. And then I had a chance to take over the Great Lakes Culinary Institute back in 2019. So I was at this school. It was fall of 2019, and I hadn't seen the school run as a full academic year before COVID hit. So that spring of 2020, everybody experienced a major life-changing event, and we spent the next year trying to figure out how do we operate a culinary school partially online, and if we are in person, we have to be masked and shielded and remain 6 feet apart. And if we had to be within 6 feet of each other, it could only be within 15 minutes or within a 15-minute period. So we spent the next year just trying to figure out how do we operate as a culinary school and still deliver what these young adults wanted. And so it was about 2001, going into 2002, when how we operated with these restrictions was changing, and we were trying to figure out what is going to be our new normal. And during that time, we also took a look at our curriculum, our financial health, and just we saw a climbing deficit and a tanking enrollment, and we needed to do something to change that. And even the president of the college sat in front of me and said, what do you want to do? Do you want to close the college, close the school, or do you want to change it? And we said, oh no, we're going to change it. We're not going to close a culinary school that makes such an impact here in Northwestern Michigan. So my team and I, we spent a good 6 months really deep diving into what are we doing and what are we teaching. We looked at what were the things that we taught about food that we needed to continue to teach the way we were teaching them. And then we looked at a lot of the changes that were happening within the food service industry. And like I said, in the last 10 to 20 years, the food industry has been changing. We've been looking more at how do we become more environmental friendly? How do we embed these new policies and procedures in what we do every day in the kitchens? And likewise, how do we make that change and move it forward? I think a lot of us have also heard about culinary medicine or culinary as medicine. Anybody out there have kind of heard a little bit about that? So we're now becoming educated consumers about what are we putting in our body and why are we putting that in our body. We're also thinking about, well, why should we eat this with this? Because what does that do to our body when we're combining certain ingredients? So bring that back into environmental stewardship. So we really took a look at all the things that we're trying to do. We see what's happening in the industry and the changes that chefs are trying to make. And how do we embed that in what we're teaching our young culinarians coming out of Northwestern Michigan? So we sat there and said, well, what is environmental stewardship? That's a huge umbrella term that you can tell just being here today is huge. It means a lot of different things. But when you think of yourself as an individual in your home, what does environmental stewardship look to you? Because that is how each and every one of us can make a change that then not trickle down, but more of that upward motion into the giant umbrella of environmental stewardship. So as an institute, we talked about what does that mean? What would it look like in our curriculum? And how do we identify that? Now, our curriculum is everything from how do you use your knife to how do you fabricate a chicken to how do you cook world cuisines. How do you restore food in a garde-manger kitchen where there's a lot of preserving of food, in a bakery, in a restaurant, and even in lecture classes, how do you develop your menu? And then we also looked at what classes, or I should say, what subjects are we not covering? And farm to table was one of them. So again, we started looking at, well, what can we teach our young culinarians on how to improve what they're doing for that environmental stewardship? So we first focused on that class, Farm to Table. What does it mean? What could it be? It's an 8-week class, and we knew we wanted it to be a culinary class where students were cooking. But we also wanted the students to start visiting area farms. So what we've developed is a curriculum where every other week the students are going out and they're visiting 3 to 4 farms in 2 6-hour classes. And we chose to have this class every fall in the first 8 weeks of our semester. So that would be mid-August until early October. We figured there's still going to be things growing in the fields. We have farms with a lot of greenhouses, and that's where we started our planning. So the students now go out every other week in that 8-week period, and they're learning why is it important to have a strong relationship with a chef, or with a farmer as a chef? What does soil health truly dictate to me as a chef and my menu? So while we're not doing soil samples and we're not really getting into the science behind what's happening in the earth, the students are now walking away with a true understanding of why should I purchase from my area farm? What does it mean to cook seasonal foods and seasonal cuisines? And where is the connection to the nutrition? And then again, why is that nutrition piece so important to me as a chef? So that was the first class that really helped us lay the building blocks down to environmental stewardship and what that looks like in our classes. We then started looking at how do we dispose of food waste, we already were recycling. And we did have a composting connection, but we weren't really sure that that food waste was really going somewhere that it needed to go. So what we did was we found an area farm that said, we would like to take your compost and we will take it for free. That was a blessing. But they said, let's take it for free. They set up bins. So we have bins that are vegan only bins. And then we have no rules compost bins. So the students really learned, well, what's the difference and why? And it's because the farm really wanted to do something very specific with the no meat, food only compost bin. And then they were perfectly fine with the no rules bins so that they could do their other projects on the farm with that. The students then really started learning now, wow, I have to really think about what am I putting in the compost bin, and they've now upped their participation in what they put in the recycling bins. So we have recycling bins in all of the kitchens as well as in the hallways. And it's so great to sit there and watch the students actually rinse out containers and put them in the bins and really think about what are they putting in the landfill, or the landfill bin, the compost bin, and the recycling bin. In fact, many of our classes now, they can't just toss things in those bins. They actually have to have clear buckets on their tables so the instructor can actually see where is their food waste, in what category is it. And then the students can see, wow, I'm putting this in my compost bin, but what else can I do with that? How do we even minimize what we put in the compost bin? Because we know there's a lot of energy that goes into raising that food, whether it's meat, seafood, or plant-based. So then how do we use every part of that if we can? We know we can't use every single part of a plant-based item or a food-based item, but how do we reduce what we put in the compost bin? Now, we all know food scraps are great for chicken stock, vegetable stock, but there's only so much stock that you can hold on to. So what are we doing with it? So students really started looking at those clear bins that were on their workstations that had their food scraps that they knew could go in the compost bin. But then they started realizing, wow, if I have to peel this cucumber, where can I put the peels? If I have to peel a carrot, what can I do with the peels? What about the green tops, turning it into carrot top pesto? I think a lot of us have heard about these really unique recipes that you can follow to truly use what we classify as food waste. It's kind of sad to think that we think food waste are carrot tops. I mean, there is so much part of that food that we truly can eat, and it's truly not waste. So we've really pushed the bar on that creativity with the students. And while we do have a curriculum that we have to follow day by day, week by week, there's plenty of room to fill in the gaps with what do we do with that food waste? How can we still turn it into something very nutritious? So that, the first layer was really just understanding what are we producing in our space and what can we do with it? So then we started looking at our other classes that aren't so environmentally focused or have a name called Farm to Table, which kind of gives you the idea that we're being environmentally focused. So let's turn to the bake shop. So we've got chocolate and cream and eggs and flour. So in the bake shop, we do bring in quite a bit of processed food, because flour is processed, chocolate is processed. So how do we find purveyors? Okay, so those are going to be the companies that we're purchasing food from that carry the items that we truly want to purchase as an environmentally friendly purchase, or companies that are using sustainable packaging. Because if I have to buy 50 pounds of chocolate, I would much rather get it in a package that is environmentally friendly. So now we're looking at companies that are packaging their items in more environmentally friendly things. Like, I wish we could purchase milks and juices and things that aren't in plastic. So we're looking at even those items. And while it's driving up the cost of what we spend in food, we know that it's driving down that negatively impacting environmental packaging or waste. So we are now taking the time to find the proper companies that still can give us what we need, but in a more environmentally friendly packaging. We're now trying to bring in fewer delivery trucks. So that's on the bigger scale of that environmental stewardship. How do we reduce our carbon footprint? And it's really hard because we're a small institute attached to a very large college. So we're just trying to do our little part, and we're trying to teach the students, if you just do one or two things every day, everywhere you go, you will ultimately be making a very large impact on environmental stewardship and the positive conditions that our environment has. So teaching the students now how to not only compost, recycle, and then be very mindful of what's in the landfill bin, we're now teaching them how to reduce even what's going in those bins. Not only because it's a moneymaker, we can sell a carrot peel salad or carrot peels as garnishes, but that nutritional value and then putting less in the bin. So again, we looked at each class. So what does the baking class do? Something we teach our students, and probably many of you have gone to a restaurant or maybe you've seen a food show where, has any of you gotten a really fancy dessert at a restaurant? Raise your hands. Like where you can look at it and go, wow, I can count at least 8 or 9 different components on this plated dessert, and it's beautiful. But you have to think of the amount of energy that's put into producing those items that go on your plate. The carbon footprint, producing the items, and traveling or transporting all of those items to you. And then all of the packaging that they're coming in. So we are teaching our students also to be very mindful of all of the ingredients that are going into every plate. While it is on a competition level, getting 7 to 12 items on a dessert plate is key. It's overkill when you're really trying to run a restaurant with the theme of environmental stewardship. So what can you do to deliver that impactful experience to the guest when they see the food on the plate, when they eat it? But how can you do that with 3 to 5 things on the plate? It was interesting. Pre-COVID, we were the host to a culinary medicine conference. And this was really focusing on using as much as you can with as little as possible. And this one chef, they peeled the carrot, they cut off the tops, and they made a dish with the carrots, they made a dish with the peels, and they made a dish with the tops. That was great. The students were all sitting back in awe, thinking about all the things they could do with all these scraps. And one student said, well, you know, it's really great that we can put less in the bins, but this means we're probably buying less from the farmer because we're utilizing the product to its fullest extent. So I might not have to buy as much. And I mean, it was that deep forward thinking that got us really excited when we started sitting at the table realizing how do we embed environmental stewardship. And we know that we want to embrace our area farms, whether it's animal or plant or plants. We want to buy as much as we can. So then through our environmental stewardship, an additional class we brought into our curriculum was butchery and fabrication. So whole animal butchery and fabrication. We buy all of our animals as well as the seafood from within the state of Michigan, and we try to be as local as possible. And we teach the students, how do you fabricate this and use every little bit, including the bones? And how do you package it so it's not damaged if we do have to freeze it? And a lot of the food that we bring in, it gets processed in one class, and then we disperse it into multiple classes. And that's also exciting because, again, having to purchase fewer and fewer items because we can buy it in a bigger size, say a whole animal, butcher it down, and be able to use all the parts in different classes. We just recently added tower gardens into our main hallway. We have 6 huge tower gardens. Now we grow all of our own edible flowers, some of our more costly herbs, and especially our costly lettuces and microgreens. That has now driven down our expense on food because we're now growing it. While it is only 6 tower gardens, I'd love to have 12 more. But the fact is now we don't have to buy those things, and we're supplying it to our restaurant. And the students pick what they need as they need it. So it's as fresh as it can be when you're sitting down in our restaurant and ordering things. So we still have a lot to learn about environmental stewardship and how us as a culinary school can impact not only the learning and the environment, but our hope is that then our students go out into the community with these same environmental stewardship ideas, and they make more impactful changes as they go through their careers. So really, to finish it, is the next biggest project we have for environmental stewardship is next Friday is our annual fundraiser called the Taste of Success. And this will be our first time having it in person since 2019. And now we have put the environmental stewardship glasses on. And in our planning, now we are actually having what's called the Green Team, which is a student club in Northwestern Michigan College that's going to be a part of our Taste of Success. And they're actually going to pick through all of our garbage. So that with our students, I know it's a very glamorous job, but we are now purchasing any plate or utensil or little cup, if it can't be washed, it's now compostable. We're working with our farm that takes our food scraps, and they're now going to make a way to be able to take our plates that are made from sugarcane and our plant-based utensils that we purchased for the event. They're going to take all of those, and now they're going to experiment on how long does it take for those to break down and how can they use them in their practices. So next Friday, we'll all be probably scraping and picking through, but we now know that we can too be environmentally friendly and put our environmental stewardship practices to life in even a large event that's hosting 400 people. So I was happy to be invited today to speak only because, I shouldn't say only, but really because I wanted to share with you what we as a culinary school in Northwestern Michigan College are doing to try to be more environmentally friendly. And hopefully, because this is not just a trend, this is a major shift that's happening in the food service industry, we knew we needed to break apart and pull apart our very traditional curriculum and give it a breath of fresh life and add in that environmental stewardship. So thank you very much.